Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about ThruLines. What are ThruLines? Well, a few months ago at Roots Tech, Ancestry announced ThruLines as one of our new beta offerings. And a lot of you have opted into the beta and have been playing with the new tools. As a matter of fact, I just finished recording another video about the new and improved AncestryDNA match list. And if you haven't watched that yet, I would encourage you actually to go watch that video first, because that's the foundation for ThruLines, which is what we're going to talk about now. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, as of the recording of this video, nearly 15 million people have taken an AncestryDNA test. Add to that the fact that on Ancestry there are about 100 million family trees. That leads us to about 11 billion connections, which starts to boggle my mind, but also makes me really excited about the opportunities to make new discoveries all the time. Some of you know that every Sunday night, and we've been doing this for about 3 years now, my dad and I get on the phone. No matter where we are in the world, he's usually at his home in Oregon, and I'm usually here at my home in Utah. But sometimes, like this last weekend, I was in San Francisco, called in from a hotel room. If I'm traveling for work or he's traveling for work, we always make it happen. In 3 years, we've only missed 3 times. And what we do typically for about 3 or 4 hours on Sunday nights is we go through some of the new DNA matches for the week and start to see if we can figure out what the new discoveries are that we can make. Well, Ancestry in February at Roots Tech launched ThruLines. And ThruLines is built on common ancestors. So if you watched the last video, like I told you to, you would know that the common ancestors is basically how Ancestry looks at you and one of your DNA matches. And if you both have a tree attached to a public tree or a private searchable online tree, and you have all the information about the person and their parents and grandparents, our computers can go to work trying to see if we can figure out the path of your relationship. So we know you're related because you both took an AncestryDNA test, but what we're trying to figure out is how you're related or who that common ancestor is. Now, sometimes this is a really manual process, and I'm not going to get into that now. I will do a video about that in the coming weeks. I've done videos about it in the past, but they need a little refreshing and updating, so look for that. But the new Common Ancestors feature replaces the old Shared Ancestor hints. And because of the way that we do it now, you don't both have to have the common ancestor in your tree in order for us to show it to you. So we'll follow your tree as far as it goes, and then if your tree doesn't look like it connects with your matches tree, we'll go out and search the other 100 million trees on Ancestry and see if we can fill in the blanks for you. Now, you do need to remember that these are just hypotheses. These are potential paths for you to discover. You do still need to use all of the same genealogical tools that you've always used to figure out if the connections are correct. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, hopefully it will by the time we're done. So my dad and I spend our Sunday evenings looking at the common ancestor matches that have come in the previous week. And there's always a few to go through every week. But recently, we've really been digging into ThruLines, because what ThruLines does is it takes the common ancestor information, and rather than looking at it from a one-to-one perspective, you to your match, it's looking at it from the perspective of the ancestor and all of your DNA matches who are descended from that person, likely, who also have trees attached, and those trees are public or private and searchable, and they have information about themselves and hopefully their parents and grandparents in their tree. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, is the ThruLines. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, I just want to show you the different ways you can access ThruLines. So right now, there are 3 main entry points. The first one is from your DNA homepage. Okay, and over here, this card on the right is now ThruLines. That used to be DNA circles. It's being replaced here with ThruLines. You can, for a time, still get to your DNA circles, this little blue link down here, but you can explore your ThruLines by clicking on the giant green button in the ThruLines widget box there. Okay, and what that takes you to then is a page that looks like this. So I'm viewing this from a privatized account so that you don't see my parents' full names and birth dates and faces, but these are my parents. And then it shows me my 4 grandparents. Aren't they cute? Okay. And then it shows me my 8 great-grandparents. Need to get a picture for that guy. And then it shows me my 16 great-great-grandparents, and it just goes all the way down to 5th great-grandparents. So 32 thirds, 64 fourths, okay? And then, okay, back up to the top. A couple of things about the ThruLines page. First thing is, when you click on this little filter, you're going to see some options there. The first one is ancestors from Crista's tree. So if you remember when we talked about common ancestors, anybody that's from your tree is going to be in a solid white box, and anybody that's from someone else's tree is going to be in a dotted translucent box. So I can filter to just those potentials, and you can see here, right, these dotted boxes that are kind of a little bit paler. Okay, as opposed to when I go back to the ancestors from my tree, these solid boxes. Okay, so in my tree, not yet in my tree, and maybe they don't belong in my tree yet. These potential ancestors are just places for me to explore who is genetically connected to me that might think these are their ancestors, and if that's a legitimate connection, then I should be able to also then go find additional evidence of those connections. So I add the genetic evidence to the paper trail. Okay, so that's the first way that we get into ThruLines, is through the DNA homepage and clicking on Explore ThruLines. The second way that we can get into ThruLines is from the Common Ancestors page. So again, if you remember from the last video, this is cousin Catherine, who's given me permission to use her match page with us for our videos. And over here on the left-hand side, you're going to see the common ancestors. In this case, our common ancestors are Park and Carrie. And if I click on View Relationship, it shows me the chart that connects Catherine up through her mother and grandfather to the great-grandfather, and then down through my great-grandfather and my grandfather, and then there's my dad. This is my dad's match to Catherine. They're second cousins. I can click to see how much DNA they share and what the possible relationships are. And this is a one-to-one relationship. But if I want to see a one-to-many relationship, I can click on View ThruLines here under Park's name in this top box. So right now what I'm looking at is my dad's relationship to Catherine. I click View ThruLines, and now what I'm looking at is all of the descendants of Park who have DNA tested and share DNA with my dad. So in this case, Robert has 2 descendants who've tested, and Frederick has 13 descendants who've tested, because I've tested a lot of my family, apparently. Okay, so if I click on View these 2 matches, what that's going to show me is here are the 2 descendants of Robert who have DNA tested. There's Catherine through Carmel, his daughter, through Robert's daughter Carmel, and then here is Dixie Belle through Robert's daughter Betty Jane. And unfortunately, Dixie has passed, and so Catherine now manages her test. So this gives me a view of the ThruLines, and it's not just one-to-one now. It has the potential to be one-to-many. Now in this case, Park only had 2 children, and so there are only 2 children listed here, but if he'd had more children, we could see those. As a matter of fact, one of the other ways, the third way you can get to ThruLines is from your tree. So here's my tree. I'm looking at this from a privatized account, so it looks kind of funny. This is what living people look like when you are viewing someone else's tree. I'm just viewing my own tree from another account so that you can see what that looks like. So can't see the information about living people. You can see the information about deceased people. There's a new little icon over here on the far left, just underneath your little toolbar here, okay? And it's a little DNA helix. And if you click on that, it pops out a side panel that allows you to turn on ThruLine icons. So I turn that on, and you'll see it adds this little layer of icons to my tree. Now, because I'm in pedigree view, there are ThruLines for all of these people, okay? But if I'm in family view, click it and flip it on its head here, what you'll quickly see is that those little ThruLines icons only show up on my ancestors. So my aunts and uncles and cousins, I didn't get DNA from them. I share DNA with them, but I didn't get DNA from them. And so this allows me to see really quickly in my tree who my ancestors are, and then I can click on that little icon and I can go view the ThruLines for that particular individual in my tree. So I can do that from the pedigree view or from the family view if I've turned on the ThruLines icons in my tree. So those are the three ways that you can get to ThruLines. You can get to them from the homepage, you can get to them from a common ancestor hint with a match, or you can get to them through your tree. Now, what does all of this mean? The question then, of course, is how do I interpret this information? So we're going to look here in just a minute at a larger ThruLine in my own tree rather than just the one with Park where he only has 2 children. And the thing that you need to keep in mind as you view the ThruLines is you share DNA with the people at the bottom of the chart. You'll see what that looks like here in just a minute. Again, the solid white boxes reflect information that's already in your tree, and the dotted transparent boxes represent information found in other trees on Ancestry. So if we flip back over here and we take a look at this particular ThruLine, this is the ThruLines for Henry Ditmore. Henry Ditmore is my dad's great-great-grandfather, so he's my 3rd great-grandfather. And there are 73 DNA matches that match my dad that also appear to connect back to Henry Ditmore. So Henry has all these children, and I could keep scrolling over here to the side, and you'd see more and more and more of them. Okay, I don't want to reveal any information about people I don't have permission to reveal information about, so I'm not going to scroll all the way over. But basically, this is a view of all of the children of Henry who have descendants who have DNA tested. So the first thing you need to keep in mind when you're viewing this is it might not be all the children. It's just the children who have descendants who have DNA tested. And if you look at the bottom of each of the boxes representing each of the children, it tells you how many of their descendants appear to have DNA tested. So Caroline here has 5, and Eliza has 25, and Ann Eva, who's my great-great-grandmother, has 26. There's my dad in the circle. Emily has 7, and so on, okay? I can then click on that number, 5, 25, 26, and it'll expand the chart. So now what I'm looking at is these are the DNA matches for Caroline's children. So again, we have her daughter has 2, and this daughter has 1, and this daughter has 1, and so on. Okay, so you start to get this visual or charted representation of the people who share DNA with you. We show you the amount of shared DNA, and we show you the tree relationship, in this case, based on this tree data that we've been able to collect. Now, I'm going to pop open this particular match, expand that line. So Caroline here, who is the daughter of Henry, my great-great-great-grandfather, Caroline has a daughter named Rhoda, and then Rhoda has a great-grandchild who is a DNA match. What you'll notice here is that here are 2 of those translucent dotted boxes, which means however this match is connected up through Henry, we don't have this information in our tree. We have Rhoda in our tree, but we don't have her child in our tree. The other thing is, because it says private on both of these, there's one of two things happening. Either this person's tree is private but searchable, okay, because if it was unsearchable, this chart, he wouldn't even be included in ThruLines at all. But if it's searchable and private, it's going to tell me that there's a relationship there. It's going to tell me who the common ancestor is, but I'm not going to be able to see the details of the information in the tree. Now, the easiest way to check that is to click on this box. And what that's going to open up is a page that tells me exactly what the status of that information are. So in this, what the status of that information is. So what this tells me is that this person has a tree, and that person, David Thomas Vincent, born in 1928, is in this tree, but that if I want to see any other information about it, I need to contact him, which I'm more than happy to do to see if he can provide me with some additional information. Or I can just go look this person up, David Thomas Vincent, in the 1930 or 1940 census. Maybe I can go look for a marriage record or some additional information. Maybe there's an obituary if he's passed away recently. So lots of other ways I can explore that, or I can contact this match to see if I can get some additional information. Then this node in the tree, right, this person, also private, when I click on that person, it takes me to this screen, again, same screen, but what it tells me is that this person is still living. So whoever this match is, their parent, that is the branch of the tree that we connect through, is still living. So again, I would need to contact him if I want to see any additional information. So you can always click on any of the nodes in the chart, the people in the chart. But again, if it's in a solid box, you're just going to click through to your own tree. If it's in a dotted box, you're going to click through to whatever tree Ancestry used to create this path to assume this relationship. Now again, remember, it's just a hypothesis, so you're going to want to explore that, look up census records, obituaries, birth, marriage, and death records, anything you can to give further validity to that relationship. But this is a really great way to start to collect lots of matches under a particular ancestor, in this case, my Henry Ditmore, so that we can start to see who the descendants are. And really, the more DNA matches you have to a common ancestor, it's kind of stronger evidence that this person really is your ancestor, that you've really identified the right people, that you're climbing your family tree and not someone else's. Okay, well, ThruLines has been out in beta for a couple of months now, and we've taken lots of feedback and we've made some changes, and there's a few other little things that we're going to be doing based on feedback from you in the coming months. But there's also been some of you who have been a little bit frustrated because you haven't been able to figure out how to get ThruLines or some of those common ancestor hints. So there's just some basic troubleshooting. I mentioned earlier that you need to make sure that you have your tree attached to the person in the tree who took the test, and you need to make sure your tree is either public or that it is private searchable. So if it's private unsearchable, you will not be able to participate in common ancestors or ThruLines. Another thing I need to make sure that we're really clear about is that ThruLines doesn't affect your tree in any way. On Ancestry, your tree is your tree, and nobody, including us, can edit or change it unless you've expressly given permission for that, shared your tree and given someone the editor or collaborator rights to do that. So ThruLines is just a visual representation of information from your tree connected to some of the other tree data on Ancestry to help figure out potential paths for you to explore about how you're related to your DNA matches. None of that information gets automatically added to your tree. You have to choose to add that information. So that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing you need to be aware of is that you need to make sure you're entering information into your tree following genealogy standards. I know some of you think, well, it's my tree, I'll do it how I want, and you are absolutely correct. You can do your tree however you want. However, there are genealogy standards, and we program our computers to follow those standards, which means that when we're trying to compare information in trees, or when our computers are trying to compare information in trees, we need to be able to have some consistency to be able to make those comparisons. So here's what I mean by genealogy standards. A, we always enter women into the family tree using their maiden name and nothing else. So you put in their given names and their maiden name. Doesn't matter if they've been married once or a dozen times, you do not put in their husband's surnames. If you don't know the woman's maiden name, leave it blank. You can leave it totally blank, or I prefer the method of doing 5 underscores. It creates a nice little blank line, and it doesn't interfere with any of the automated computer processes. So that is the genealogy standard for names. Don't enter any characters in the name. Don't enter any nicknames or quotes. Or I've seen it all. All sorts of different things that people sometimes do in an attempt to try to create some kind of a system for them that works. And like I said, it's your tree and you do you, but anytime you put anything in those name fields that is non-standard, it makes it more difficult for the computers to compare that information to determine if these are the same people. And so you might be missing out on some of those common ancestors or ThruLines because of that. Now I will tell you, because if you watched my previous video, you've seen my little colored hearts hack. Anything that you put in the suffix field does not affect that technology. It's just the name fields that you have to keep really clean and standard. The other thing you need to keep in mind that revolves around standards has to do with dates and places. So you want to make sure that you enter dates in the genealogy standard. So date, month, year. So you enter the 2-digit date, the 3-character month, and the 4-digit year. That's the genealogy standard for dates. And then for places, you want to put in the full name of the city, the county, and the state or country. So don't abbreviate states or other information. Just keep them really as clean as possible, because again, that gives our computers the best chance of comparing that information and recognizing it as the same information that someone else has in their tree, so that we can help serve up some of this information. Another thing that conflicts with some of the technology's ability to read your tree and help present information correctly has to do with non-biological relationships. Now, I know that families are messy, and families have always been messy, and they come in all sorts of configurations. And you know, people are raised by step parents and people are adopted into different families, but when we're talking about DNA, we're talking about biological relationships. And so we want to make sure that the biological relationships are reflected accurately in the tree, and that the non-biological relationships are also reflected accurately. That means that if somebody is a step parent, the best solution is just to not attach that child to that parent at all. The nature of the relationship of the marriage of the parent to the step-parent makes it clear that they're the step-parent. But if you do, for whatever personal reasons, want to attach the child to a step-parent or to adopted parents for perfectly good reasons, just make sure that in the edit relationship box for that child, that you have denoted that that is a non-biological relationship. Our computer looks at that, and then we don't try to follow that path. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, as always, if you've got questions about any of this, just leave them in the comments, and I will do my best to answer those. Well, that is all I have prepared for you today. Hopefully you're as excited as I am to start to explore your ThruLines. Like I said, my dad and I just have so much fun every Sunday night when we get together, going through our new DNA matches and exploring the connections and validating our research with this information, using it as additional evidence that the research we've done for years is right, using these DNA matches as new evidence for new paths to explore to break down some of our brick walls, and then connecting with some of these cousins. We've made some really cool connections with people who have had stories and photos and information to share with us about our shared ancestry, and it has just been delightful, not just to spend that time with my dad, which is absolutely delightful, but also to really make these connections and these discoveries. I would love to hear about the success that you are having with some of these discoveries. Please leave comments as you come across more information. You can do that here on the YouTube channel, or if you don't want to come back and find this video later, you can find me on Instagram at Crista Cowan, and I would love to hear your stories of success as you start to work with your DNA match list, with this new and improved DNA match list, and with the new ThruLines experience. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.